Chris Jones, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Let's start off with the ICE protest. It is a very trending topic these days. ICE enforcement has drawn protests from your side of the aisle, saying ICE are violators of civil liberty. But at the end of the day, they do have a job they are ordered to do, and they're met with increased violence. And we've seen the lives of law enforcement threatened while performing their function, and we've also seen lives lost. How do you feel about this?
You know, the ICE situation is one I think we have to step back from first a bit, because it's easy to lose sight of the humanity of it all. You certainly have agents that are doing their job in most cases and that want to return home safely. And then you have families that are out and about, whether it be to protest or in the normal course of life, and they want to return home safely. And all too often we get lost in the chaos. So for me, when I think about it, I step and say, is this tactic making our community safer, or is it making us measurably less safe? And what we see in some cases, particularly Minnesota, the danger and chaos is escalating. And to me, that is the part of the question that our Congress should be asking. You know, the tactics that are being deployed to our communities, are they making us safer? And they're not.
Do you think...
And I'll also add that, interestingly, you're hearing pushback not just from Democrats. You're hearing pushback from conservatives, from independents, who are saying that local law enforcement need to be empowered and equipped with the tools and the resources they need to keep communities safe. And in the case of their in partnership with ICE, they want ICE to be trained. They want ICE to ensure that they're hyper-focused on a specific job.
Obviously, what happened in Minnesota, Minneapolis, was tragic.
Very.
We see the protests every day. Everyone's seen that Ms. Good was struck by the officer in her car. The officer drew his weapon and shot and killed her. Do you feel the officer was justified in using deadly force?
I asked the question earlier, does anyone deserve to be shot and killed? And I think that's a question we have to keep in mind. At the same time, I think it's important for us to take a beat, to pause, and let there be an investigation. And an investigation will actually reveal all of that. And I'll tell you, again, I go back to Congress. Congress has a role in making sure that cases like these are investigated.
So let's specifically talk about the laws that ICE is enforcing that's causing all of this disruption. Do changes need to be made to these laws?
Which laws are you talking about specifically?
The laws that ICE have to follow nowadays.
Again, I go back to the question of, are these tactics, laws, making our community safer or less safe? And when you hear stories of families being snatched out of their homes, when you hear stories of people being picked up on the way to the hospital, I think, there's a question to be asked about, are these, again, things making us safer? And we're not asking the question. You know, I say, where is our congressman? You know, where's French Hill in leading the charge to ask the question of, are we being protected?
What's your stance on illegal immigration?
I think we need stronger borders for sure. And we need an immigration system that actually is efficient and effective and allows people to go through that immigration system. I think so for me, part of the challenge is a lot of times the rules are unclear, but I certainly don't disagree that we have not done a good enough job at strengthening our borders to make sure we know who's coming through and when.
What's your position on those who are here illegally? How do you think their cases should be handled? Is it being handled correctly now, in your opinion?
No. It is both a situation of fairness and also a situation of efficiency. And I think in both cases, it's not being handled well.
Let's move on now to Venezuela. Has the largest oil reserve in the world. And while most people are focused on stopping the drugs, it's not just about the drugs or the oil. It's about China. And now that President Trump has made it clear that we control Venezuela and the oil. Is that a way, you think, of disarming China? And would that make it more of a military move than more focused on drugs?
Look, the president said we're going in to take the oil. The president said we're going to run the country. We've seen this playbook before. We saw it in Iraq, and we saw what happened as a result of that. So for me, it goes back to the essential question. You know, I am running for Congress to address these issues, and I'm running for Congress because the person that we have in the congressional seat right now is not asking the tough questions. I do believe that when the objective isn't clear, and when your goal isn't clear and the plan isn't clear, you run the risk of a slippery slope. And again, 10 years and billions of dollars and thousands of lives is what we saw in Iraq, and no Arkansan wants to see that again.
What do you think the goal is? Do you think it's really about drugs and oil, or is this about cutting China's military? Is this a military strategy? Do you think the Pentagon was involved in bringing Venezuela's President Maduro, here?
Look, that's the thing. I have no idea. And the American people have no idea, and Arkansans have no idea. And it's the responsibility of Congress to investigate so that we can have an idea of what the actual goal is. Unfortunately, we don't know, and we need to know.
And now to Iran. President Trump keeps making statements that he supports Iranians and has said, quote, help is on the way. What kind of help do you think that is?
Again, I can't get in his head. I have no idea what help is coming. I do think there's a question of how we treat protesters abroad and how we treat protesters in our own country. That is a real question. And if I was a mind reader, I could tell you. But there is a way to find out. Congressional investigations. And that's not what's happening right now.
On to your point right there. What do you think that help would look like? What would you want that help to look like? Does that involve Congress? And what can Congress do? Is it military strikes? Is it, what legitimate help can we provide without disturbing the Middle East?
So I'd say this. We know that the responsibility of Congress is to play an active role anytime the U.S. is considering or in war. So absolutely Congress plays a role. And the reason Congress plays a role is because Congress represents us. And we need our voice heard there. So one, I think Congress has a role and they're not playing it. Two, I think these are situations where if you don't have investigations and if you aren't having the conversation, it's really easy to slip into a situation where there is no clear goal.
Do you think we should even be intervening in the Iran situation?
Unfortunately, I'm not privy to top secret information, confidential information. I believe there are times when we should intervene. Absolutely. It is our role. I also believe there are times when we should exercise restraint. What I do know is that Congress has abdicated their responsibility to have those tough conversations and answer the question of, do we intervene, to what extent, and what is the ultimate objective? And that's what they're sent to Washington to do, and they're not doing it.
Now, violence in the Middle East is something that's not unusual. We've seen it for many years. Yeah. We also see outcry from other governments and humanitarian organizations that decry violence of any sort. More recently, we've seen this in the war with Israel and Gaza. Some critics argue that movements quick to rally around one crisis remain silent on the other, asking whether this was ever about human rights at all. How do you respond to that criticism?
I'll go back to my fundamental principles. We have to, particularly in tense situations, take a pause, take a beat, and ask the question, and remember our humanity, absolutely. And again, I sound like a broken record, but it's true. We send Congress to D.C. to have these tough conversations, to ask these questions, to understand what's really happening, and then to make decisions on our behalf. I'm not privy to confidential information, top secret information. But what I do know is that far too often we take situations like this and the loudest voices drown out voices of reason across the board. As congressman, I would want to bring a voice of reason to every situation.
Do you think the protests that were happening all across the nation, at universities, at capitals, state capitals, regarding Gaza, do you see those protests happening regarding the Iran situation now?
You know, I've always said, regardless of how you feel about an issue, when there are mass protests, you should pay attention to what's actually going on. I think there are lessons to be learned. There are issues to be lifted up and addressed. So when I think about protests there, protests in Minnesota, protests in Portland, protests here in Little Rock, I am careful to say what's at the heart of it, what issue do we need to address, and how can we address it in a way, and for me, it's how can we address it in a way that benefits Arkansans.
On China and competition and jobs, with the U.S. facing serious competition from China in technology and trade, what specific policies would you champion to protect American industries, Arkansas jobs, especially in manufacturing and agriculture?
Yeah. So I'm a tech guy, so I love that question about technology and what we can do. I believe we have some of the most creative and innovative minds in this country and even in this state. There was a program through the Small Business Administration. It's called the Regional Innovation Clusters. That program provided supports locally to regional clusters to do things like artificial intelligence we had here, like lithium development and the lithium industry, which we had here, like cybersecurity, which is across the country. Unfortunately, that program was cut. So when the One Big Beautiful Bill was signed, which French Hill supported, for me, it's programs like those that we need to support because they do promote innovation. They do promote businesses. They do promote small businesses. So that's what one of the things I would do to focus on, our competitive edge over China.
As Congress debates defense spending in the context of global crises, how would you prioritize national security while also funding economic development and quality of life programs here in Arkansas?
Yeah. So for me, in Congress, there's first a moral test. I always ask the question of where does it align with my morality? I would ask that question. And then there are 4 questions that I would ask when considering policies, bills, and the like. You know, one is, what does it do to lower the real cost of living for Arkansans? 2 is, what does it do to strengthen Arkansas's future and protect it? 3 are the folks most impacted by that policy at the table. And then finally, the question that I'm going to ask when the policy is debated and the like. And finally, the question that I would ask is, when we think about the systems of power, does this move power to the connected and the well-to-do, or does it move power to the people? Those are the 4 questions I would ask. And I look at everything. I would look at everything through that filter.
Do you think everything is going according to your filter right now?
Going well? Absolutely not. I think there.
What are you seeing people in your district?
One, I don't believe that everything is ever just going absolutely well. As we're talking about humans, and there's always issues. When I launched the campaign, because listening is so important, we did 8 town halls, 1 in every county in the district. And what I heard consistently was that the price of housing is way too high, that the price of health care is way too high and going up, groceries and utilities. There are a few other things they said, but I want to hone in on specifically housing. And the reason I'm honing in on is because I think I'm a Democrat, and I think Democrats messed up in this situation. We have been talking for decades about the fact that venture capitalists, private corporations are coming in and buying up homes sitting on them and making housing prices and rents go up. Well, the president came out and said, no more, won't let it happen. Now, I think the devil's in the details. I think the devil's in the fine print, and I would love it if our Congressman French Hill would actually look at the fine print. But the fact that they said this is an issue and we're going to address it, I think is good. And I think Democrats missed the mark for decades on that. So for me, when I look through the filter and I look at what I've heard, those are the kinds of things that I would promote.
And the world is facing record temperatures and climate challenges. Do you support re-engagement with international climate accords? And how would you ensure Arkansas benefits from federal clean energy and resiliency investments? Also, in addition to this, your thoughts on windmills?
Yeah. So look, you talk to farmers, and whatever language you use, whether you call it climate change, climate mitigation, they are seeing the direct impact of differences in weather patterns on their crops, and that's impacting their pocketbook. So it's real to them. It's real in the cities. So the big question we have to ask is, when you have big challenges, who should be at the table to solve it? This is a global challenge and issue, and globally, we should all be a part of it, especially the world superpower in the U.S. We must be at the table to actually fix it and solve it. I'll tell you, I'm a nuclear engineer, so I'm definitely a nuclear guy. I'm also a solar guy. At the end of the day, I think we need an all-of-the-above approach. Windmills work in some places, solar panels work in some places, geothermal works in other places, nuclear works in some places. If we're going to truly address the core issue and the root cause, we're going to have to bring all of our solutions and tools to the table.
Let's go back to global migration and human rights for a second. Across the globe, migration and humanitarian crises are intensifying. What should U.S. immigration policy look like? And how can Congress respectfully balance border security with protections for asylum seekers and humanitarian commitments?
Yeah. Well, it starts with a strong, secure border and clarity around what that means. Clarity around how we are accepting immigrants and what that process is like. The more clarity we have, the better. I think we've, again, for decades, and this is not partisan, this is across administrations, we've missed the mark. I would have loved for Congress to debate the issue, to talk about the nuances of it, and then to come up with a real comprehensive solution that could be put into play, and it hasn't happened yet. Should I serve in Congress? Part of it is being at the table to debate it. I think it's an issue that impacts not only the coast, not only the border states, but also places like Arkansas, particularly in the farming industry.
You said farming. Farmers across Arkansas are reporting challenges with high input costs, low commodity prices, and potential major net losses. With calls for federal support and improved market access. What are you hearing from the people in your district?
Same thing. They want access to markets. They are deeply frustrated by the tariffs. The tariffs not only increase prices, but they introduce ambiguity and instability to the market. They need to know what the input prices are, because that's how they plan over the course of multiple seasons. Farmers are not happy across the district, and dare I say across the state as well. We're seeing farmers that are having to go bankrupt because they cannot carry the load and the burden anymore. And let me make a link here. Is when farmers are impacted, our food is impacted. Arkansas is the hungriest state in the nation, dead last in food insecurity, or should I say we lead the nation in food insecurity. That is enormously problematic when we feed the world but can't find out how to feed our own families. So the instability that we see with farmers, the stress that we see with them, which leads to small family farms having to go bankrupt and close, is only going to exacerbate and make worse our food insecurity issue.
If elected, what would you do to help fix this?
Yeah. Well, first, again, we got to bring some stability to the market. Get rid of these crazy tariffs. And I say crazy, understand tariffs in and of themselves are not bad. The haphazard nature, the random nature of it, that's bad. That doesn't help the market at all. That's one. Two, we think it's disconnected, but what's happening at the Fed is also directly connected to the pressure and the pain that farmers feel. So when you have an unchecked president who says, I'll fire the Fed chair if they don't change rates, no one, independent, Republican, Democrat, no one wants that level of, again, instability in the market. And it directly impacts farmers and families and communities.
You mentioned briefly that Arkansas is #1 in food insecurity.
Yeah.
How would you fix this if elected?
Yeah. So there are two parts to that equation. I serve on the board of the Hunger Relief Alliance, which is there to address food insecurity, to be a safety net, to provide for those that have fallen through the mesh and then fallen on hard times, often no fault of their own. So, one, we must strengthen our safety nets. We must make sure that organizations like the Arkansas Hunger Relief Alliance and others have the resources they need to address the issue. But I think we also have to go back to the root cause. Part of it is a distributional challenge. We make food here, it doesn't get to tables. We have to fix that supply chain. Part of it is a price challenge. Things are way too expensive. And it's not enough to get a tortilla and a piece of chicken for $3. Like, we need to do more. We need to make groceries more affordable. That to me is one way. But then the last piece, which is equally important, the cost of living, the real cost of living, is both the price of goods and the money we have to buy those goods. Our wages have not kept up with inflation. Our wages have not kept up with the cost of living. They haven't over the course of decades. And I'll tell you, if you look at Congress, and I ask folks to go check, over the past 10 years, ask yourself, how much wealth have individual members of Congress gained over the last 10 years in comparison to the wage increase of individuals in Arkansas over the last 10 years? There's a major gap. So it's multi-pronged, but it's not that complicated. Pay people more, help to reduce the price of goods, and make sure you strengthen the safety net.
Let's go back to the farmers. Arkansas farmers are facing historic economic pressure.
Yeah.
It starts here, doesn't it? It starts here, Chris. The farmers have to be able to do their job so that we can put food on the table. Arkansas is a farming state.
Yeah.
Many say federal policies have left them unable to break even. What specific steps would you take in Congress to help stabilize farm income?
Yeah. Lots. I think there are two key steps. And again, I challenge everyone to ask themselves not what French Hill's rhetoric has been, but what his voting record has been on this. We need a solid farm bill that actually addresses these concerns and these issues. We haven't had a farm bill in who knows how long. And that's Congress's responsibility. And two, we need to address the volatility of tariffs, which are a tax. And we say what you will, color it how you want to. Tariffs at the end of the day are taxes. And I'll tell you, Arkansans don't like paying taxes to the federal government. And it's not a quip that we throw out. It's a real thing. So address tariffs, which are taxes, but also address the farm bill, which provides that level of stability to our farmers, because you are absolutely right. Farmers produce the food that goes on our tables. I'm going to make one more link as well I think is important. We have way too many families that are having to make a really hard choice. Sally is hungry at the end of the day because their parent has to decide, do I put food on the table or do I get prescription drugs for Granny? Prescription drug prices are going way up too high. Health insurance is going way up to way too high. Our premiums have quadrupled in this state. And so when you have families that are faced with that tough choice, yeah, it leads to greater insecurity or increased health issues. And I do think it's tied directly back to farming, because the stronger our farming industry is, the more we can get healthy food to local food to our residents here, the better we are. And often it's a cheaper price, which then helps to mitigate some of the struggle and challenge.
Let's move to healthcare.
Yeah.
Another very important topic
Very.
in the state of Arkansas. Chris, Arkansas's rural healthcare system is under a real strain, as you've heard. With hospitals closing or on the brink across the state, what's driving this rural hospital crisis? How is it affecting patient care and emergency access? And what needs to happen now to keep these hospitals open?
Yeah, that's a rich issue. So my wife's an emergency medicine physician, and she sees the impact of when rural hospitals close. Where do those people show up and go? They come to her emergency room. And at the end of the day, if they're showing up in the emergency room, we're paying for it. So it doesn't help our pocketbook. It doesn't help the bottom line. Here's the challenge. When given the opportunity to strengthen our healthcare system, to lower the rate of health insurance, to provide that stability to our hospitals, our Congressman French Hill voted against it. And that's a problem, because Arkansas history is pretty interesting. We're the only state in the South to vote to expand health care, Medicare. And what we see is that with that expansion, we didn't experience, with the Affordable Care Act, we did not experience hospital closings. Now our rural hospitals are at risk of closing because of what is happening with health insurance. And it's a problem. So here's what I think. One, we have to make sure that these ACA premiums, which support our ability to have health insurance, are lowered and lowered in the long term. Two, we have to make sure that our rural hospitals are supported. Now, I will say this. There's some emergency stabilization fund of $50 billion that has to be spread across the country. Here's what they did. They said, we're going to take from each state, making these numbers up, $20 billion that you would get off the table. And then we're going to give you $5 billion back. Well, at the end of the day, that's still a $15 billion loss to the communities. That's what we're seeing. The math ain't mathing. You take more away than you give back, it doesn't work. And we actually need someone in Congress who will fight for us to make sure we get the resources that will allow our hospitals to stay open and keep our health insurance down.
And Chris, we briefly talked about the Big Beautiful Bill, but let's get into the details. Supporters calling it the Big Beautiful Bill, promising economic growth and relief for Americans. Critics warn it could deepen gaps in health care, food security, and rural communities. When you look at the bill as a whole, who truly benefits and who could be left behind? Yeah.
That is the fundamental question that we should always ask. And it's actually one of the 4 questions that I will ask myself as I consider bills in Congress. Who truly benefits and who is left behind? The One Big Beautiful Bill solidifies, strengthens, and adds to the rigging that is in the system right now. And Arkansans do not want a system that is rigged in favor of anyone. They want real competition. They want a fair and clear rules, and they want to be able to benefit when they win, and it not go to someone who actually hasn't done the work. So what I'm hearing on the ground from folks in Arkansas, and again, we traveled the district and had real conversations with people. They're not happy with the price of insurance, it was supposed to go down with the big beautiful bill. They're not happy with their access to health care. They're not happy with the price of utilities, which was supposed to go down. They're not happy with the price of groceries, which was supposed to go down. So, the question that I'm asking is, when are we going to see the benefit? And I think that's the question that Arkansans have to ask. They promised immediate benefit, and we're not seeing it.
Chris, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I want you to get as specific as you can. And some of these might be repetitive. Let's start with food insecurity. Arkansas ranks among the worst in the nation for food insecurity. What does that say about the state's economic health and where the policy is falling short?
Yeah. It's a direct link. What's fascinating about the fact, and frustrating about the fact, that we lead the country in food insecurity is that we also feed the world in the country. So we're a state that provides food everywhere, but can't figure out a way to get it to children who go to school hungry. I think there are multiple ways to approach it, and we haven't done that. There's a connection between local farming and local communities that we have to bridge that gap. It's broken. There's a stability in local farmers that actually provide the food, and we have to fix that. It's broken. And then there's just the basic policies. We talk about, there's a connection between food insecurity, particularly for children, and educational outcomes. We want better educational outcomes, but our kids show up to school and they're hungry throughout the day. The only meal they get is at school. Now, I applaud those who have fought to make sure that we have breakfast for kids. I think we need breakfast, lunch, and snack. Because, for me, it goes back to my faith. I'm a minister, I'm a Christian, and as a Christian, we are called to help those that are in need. And when Arkansans are in need, and a lot of them are in need now because of food insecurity, I think there are specific things that we can and should do. But I'll tell you, the bottom line is, if we just took time to actually address the problem, to actually try to solve the problem, I think we'd be in way better shape. And right now, we can't find our congressman. He's not saying anything on the issue. And so many other folks who have been in power are not taking the time to actually address the issue.
Chris, let's go back to rural hospitals.
Yeah.
Rural hospitals across Arkansas are closing or hanging by a thread. If one shuts down tomorrow, what does that mean for emergency care, maternal health, and survival times?
Yeah. It's disastrous. My mom had a stroke a few years ago. And for context, she's from Stevens, Arkansas, real small town. My dad's from Hughes, Arkansas, even smaller town. My mom had a stroke in Little Rock. I was there. I saw her face droop. I heard her speech slur. We called 911. They showed up. They immediately began to address her. They quickly got her to the emergency room. Had she been in her hometown of Stevens, or had she been in my dad's hometown of Hughes, I don't think she would be with us today, because the time matters. So when a rural hospital closes, it's not just an accounting issue. These are real lives. My mom is healthy and strong now because she was able to get to the hospital quickly. We are seeing hospitals closing in areas, and it's doubling and tripling the time it takes for folks to get to the hospital. One other thing I'll add is Arkansas also leads the nation in ambulatory deserts. And it's both the presence of EMS systems, but also the amount of EMS systems. We have counties where there's one or two ambulances, that's it. And they have to traverse the entire county. The wealthiest nation in the country, it would seem to me that we can fix that.
Speaking on EMS systems,
Yeah.
ambulances do not carry blood bags as of this moment. There are rumors that steps are being taken to change this, as we saw with tornado victims earlier in 2025, it was proven that lives were saved. At least one life we know factually. Victim, a tree had fallen on her. Friends of a family called the doctor. Doctor took the blood bag to the scene. Do you think ambulances should be required to carry blood bags?
So, two things. One, anytime we can improve our chances of saving a life, I think it's definitely worth exploring, and in most cases worth doing. But the other thing is, I am outside of my lane right now in that, and I'll tell you, you want to talk to my wife if you want a real answer to whether that's right or not. And it's true, I think it's one of those. It is worth looking into, and exploring, but I don't have an answer. I haven't looked into it that deeply.
Is the rural health crisis about funding, workforce shortages, politics, or all of the above?
All of the above, and I think at the core, it's a question of will. Do we have the will to train and fund the workforce? Do we have the will to fund and support our hospital systems, particularly the political will? So I think it's a combination of all of them, but I do think that the political will to do or not to do is what's at heart, and we need representation that is willing to fight for those things.
Who should voters hold accountable if conditions continue to worsen? Lawmakers, state leadership, or Washington?
At the heart of my campaign is affordability and accountability for all, which means we want an Arkansas where all of us can afford to be here and live here and thrive. We also want accountability regardless of who you are and where you are. I think it's a combination. I think, yes, a lot of the blame sits at Washington in the chaos and the confusion that we see out of there. And we have had certain elected officials for a decade or more. If I've been in my job for a decade and I'm constantly not meeting the metrics, I'm consistently not accomplishing the goals, I'm not making things better for my company, and I choose not to show up when I'm being questioned by my bosses, then I think they deserve to be fired.
Do you think term limits need to be changed?
I do. I think there are several structural things that are important to adjust in Washington. One, term limits, but also where the money comes from. I think far too often the well-connected, the uber wealthy, and a small group of folks are benefiting from a system that's rigged in their favor and rigged against the people. So absolutely, I think there are structural changes that we have to make. And again, the money that's in politics and term limits are certainly two of those.
Do you think, for lack of a better word, that there's a lot of pork barrel spending in Washington?
It's funny you say pork barrel in Arkansas. We know our pork, right? Absolutely. We expect households to run on a tight, efficient budget. The government should do the same. Debt is way out of control in this country. There are certainly areas where, why are we spending money on X, Y, and Z? Now, here's where I differ. Absolutely we need to address the pork barrel, if you would. But we can't do it in a hyper-politicized way. It needs to be thoughtful. What we find now is that, and this is regardless of what side you're on, they'll find and identify, one phrase or word, and then they'll blow that up. Like, oh my gosh, they're investigating mosquitoes. Well, you can learn a lot from investigating mosquitoes. As an Arkansan who has been bit by a lot of mosquitoes, you can learn a lot from it. And I'm joking, but the reality of it is that as a researcher, I understand it may sound crazy to the common person, to the average Arkansan, and I don't mean that in a bad way, to the one who's not a researcher, but it's not. So yes, we need to address the issue of pork barrel spending, to use that broad term. We need to do it in a thoughtful, methodical way, because at the end of the day, the government should run on a tight budget, just like our families have to.
I asked your opponent, French Hill, in a previous interview, if he thought there was any pork barrel spending in Washington, if he participated in any pork barrel spending. He said no. Do you believe that's true?
No. And I think it's important for us to check the record. Now, I believe there are degrees of usage of quote unquote pork barrel spending. But I think it's incumbent upon us to actually check the record of our elected officials, and we should check French Hill's record and hold him accountable for that record. But again, let me also be clear. When we do this, we shouldn't be hyper politicizing it. There are things that people assign to the pork barrel bucket that aren't, and there are things that people leave off that actually are. So I think we should check his record.
Obviously, Chris, you're running because you think the job is not being done.
Yeah.
If you could speak to French Hill and you could tell him what needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed now, what would you tell him?
Yeah. Well, there's a long list. I would start by saying, do your job. That needs to happen. Part of the job is showing up and listening to the folks who are your bosses, who you represent. And he's not doing that. Part of the job is providing a check on the other branch of government. And he's not doing that. And part of the job is writing legislation that actually makes Arkansans safer and makes the cost of living better in our communities. And he's not doing that. So, at the core, I would say, do your job. And let me be clear, this is not personal. It's not. This is beyond party. I am hearing from Democrats, Republicans, Independents, that they want a representative in Washington who will listen, who will face the tough issues and not hide, and who won't filibuster when they want to pretend like they're going in one direction, but they're really going in another direction. So I would say, please stop filibustering. Please stop hiding things in the fine print. And please show up for Arkansans, because they're asking you and they're begging you and they're demanding that you do that.
If you had the power to change one policy tomorrow to stabilize rural health care and reduce hunger, what would it be?
That's a really good question. One policy would be to really strengthen our healthcare system. I think our healthcare system is what provides the funding for our rural hospitals. A strong, healthy healthcare system addresses not only physical health, but mental health as well, mental and emotional health. So I think that is the way it strengthens us to be better at education. I think our entry point into better communities is healthcare.
The crises that we mentioned in Arkansas, how long does Arkansas have before these crises become irreversible?
In some ways, they're already irreversible. When I think about the kid who's in the 7th grade, who for the entirety of their educational career, they've shown up at school hungry and have not been supported. When I think about the 1 in 4 kids who go to bed hungry every night, and we know that 0 to 5 is when you really establish who you're going to be as a person. I think for a lot of them, their trajectory has shifted for good. I am an eternal optimist, though. And I believe it's never, as long as we have breath in our body, it's never too late to address challenges and fix them. So I think there's still time. How long? I don't know. But I do know that we are in a period where it's not a slope. We are steps away from a cliff. And unless we address that and pull back, we're going to be in trouble. I don't know how far we are from that cliff, how many steps we are, but I know it's steps. And you can see it in the fact that farmers are going bankrupt. You can see it in the fact that rural hospitals are at risk of closing. You can see it in the fact that utility prices are going up like crazy. You can also see it in the fact that far too many communities, far too many individuals are literally just at odds with each other and they don't know why. I believe that's a crisis as well. And we need leadership that is willing to address the tough problems, but also do it in a way that uplifts humanity and not degrades humanity.
When you talk to families in your district,
Yeah.
as you've traveled the state, what are their prime issues that they're talking to you about?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had traveled the state before multiple times, and yet it is important to keep showing up and keep going back. And so that's why when we launched the campaign, we were in every county. We did 8 town halls, and our town halls were designed as real listening sessions where we went to the whiteboard and heard from them, heard about the challenges and heard what solutions they want. And that's what's driving my policy agenda. What consistently came up is the pressure they feel around healthcare prices. And it's real pressure. Where families, had a mother of 3 who was in tears because she did not know how she's going to afford healthcare. And one of her children has a health issue, a serious health issue. So healthcare came up. The other thing that came up was just general affordability. And it's both sides of the coin. It is the price of goods now. It's also their wages, how much money they're actually able to make. And you hear that from unions, which have constantly said we got to do better about our wages. You hear that from individuals, and you hear that from families. And then the third thing it's interesting that it came up because people said it in different ways, but I heard it over and over again. There's a global and statewide, district-wide pressure that is on folks because everything is incentivizing them to be at odds with their neighbor. Everything is incentivizing them to be in this place of tension and fighting. And it's worn them out. And we really need a place where, look, we can put aside the personal stuff and say, how do we make sure that we get out of the bottom on food insecurity for our children and for our families? How do we make sure that we keep our farms operating, particularly our small family farms? How do we make sure that folks have real jobs that provide a real living wage that allow them to not only survive but to thrive? That's what I heard from folks. So you can't really put it in a bucket, but what they're saying is at some point, if we want to avoid the cliff that descends us into full chaos, we're going to have to sit together, work together, and fight it out, and we're going to need leaders who will help us make that happen.
Okay, Chris, we only have about 10 minutes left in this recording. My last question to you is when people of Arkansas go to the ballot boxes when it's time to vote, why should they vote Chris Jones?
Yeah. Look, when people go in March, when people go in November, I want them to remember to ask themselves the question, over the last decade, has my life gotten better? And if it's not, then I believe they should vote for me because I will truly bring change that focuses on not fixing a rigged system, but addressing the rigged system that sends power, resources, money to the well-connected and the well-to-do, and putting the power back in the hands of the people and bringing some more structure to the chaos that we're seeing. So if you want to de-rig the system, if you want someone who's going to focus on affordability and accountability, then I'm saying vote for Chris Jones. And I'm hearing people say that that's what they want over and over across the district, and that's what we need. Because, as you said, we are at this cliff. And unless we truly address some serious issues and challenges, we're going to go over the cliff. That's what people want. I want people to remember when they go to the ballot boxes.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to talk about that we did not cover?
Here's the real reason we need congressional representation that is willing to put a check on the other branch of government. Whether you believe it or not, what we're hearing from this administration is that we don't need elections anymore, that we can just take the ballot boxes. It doesn't need to be true, meaning we don't need to see them taking steps to do that, for Congress to do their job and investigate, and for Congress to do their job and put some guardrails up. The guardrails are not there. If I'm in Congress, as a congressman, I would fight to make sure that we have a Voting Rights Act that protects the right to vote for everyone that is here who should be voting. Far too often we restrict the right to vote. We make it more difficult, more challenging. And the only reason we do that is so that the folks who have power can maintain and hold power. And this country was built on the power being truly in the hands of the people. The state was built on the power being truly in the hands of the people, and that power is exercised through the vote. So for me, it's critical, it's sacrosanct, it's primary that we must protect the institution of voting. And I'm disturbed and distraught at what I'm hearing and seeing from the administration. But at the end of the day, regardless of what we hear and see from the administration, it is the job of Congress to provide the guardrails. And our congressman is not providing the guardrails. That needs to change.
Dr. Chris Jones, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.